All right. So this video is going to be about getting your MCSA and or your MCSE with SQL Server 2016. So I recently got my MCSE. Um, just as of Monday, I completed my MCSE. So what did I get? I took this exam first. It's 70-761 for querying data with Transact SQL. Um, Honestly, I failed that on my first attempt. And it took me a while before I could build up my confidence to go back and take it again. I passed it the second time. I passed developing SQL databases on the first attempt, and then I passed implementing a SQL data warehouse on my first attempt. Is it worth it to take these exams and get certified? I'd say 100% yes, it is. The cost of each exam is, if you go to take the exam, it is $165 per exam. If you do it like me, though, I went ahead and I bundled my purchase. So instead of just purchasing the exam by itself, I purchased the exam with the retake option, which was kind of nice, especially for the first time when I bombed. And then it also it comes with a practice exam by Measure Up. So what kind of study material should you use? It really depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If you're just trying to pass the exam, then I'd say just the practice exam itself is good enough. What I did was kind of a combination of trying to pass the exam and trying to learn the material. So I went ahead and I purchased the exam reference book. And for the first exam, I actually focused completely on this. I worked the entire way through this, and I supplemented that with a bunch of YouTube videos. So if you see these all look the same, this is what was this guy's name? Kudvinkat, Prejim Technology. Anyway, this guy is great. The videos are pretty short, but they go kind of in a pretty good sequence. If you work through these, you're going to know pretty much everything there is to know about querying data with SQL Server. He covers almost everything. Um, so honestly, I've been working with SQL Server for about 2 or 3. Well, I'd say about 3 years when I started working on this exam. And there were still things that I learned from this. So I mean, I know that my takeaway was I felt more confident using things like window functions. Um, and yeah, I mean, I thought there was stuff that I actually learned from taking this exam that I was able to apply at work instantly. But aside from just, if you look at it and think, okay, well, $165, 200, $300 is expensive. I say all in all, if we're being honest, I probably spent about $1,000 getting my MCSE between because each one of these is what I said about 250 or so, 250, 275. So I've done that for 3 of them. Plus, I purchased the exam reference for each one of these. I think I also went out and I bought some classes on Udemy. So I went through a handful of studying techniques. If you just want to pass the exam, focus just on this, just on the measure up practice test. With the practice test, you have some options that you can set. So what I did was they typically are like 3 or 4 sections. And so what I'll do is I won't randomize the question order. I'll do the questions in order, and I'll break it up so that I'm only doing one section at a time. And then so I set the number of questions to just the number that's in that section, and then I spend 2 to 3 days on that one section, and I write everything down. And so like let's say your exam, the practice test is 150 questions. Focus also not just on what the answers are, but what the answers are not. So basically, it'll have like definitions under because it's multiple choice. So they're going to have definitions under the multiple choice of what the wrong answers were and why they were the wrong answers. And with this type of an exam, there's only so many types of questions that they can ask. So, this practice exam, it really teaches you, I'd say, most of what they're going to be able to ask you on the test. And so like those, if you're looking at 150 questions, and maybe they've got 3 or 4 questions that are the wrong answer, and you memorize what the answers for those are and when those will be the right answer. Now you've got about 600 questions to pull from in your head. So I basically wrote those all down in a notebook, just and added notes to it. And I think I filled up like 120, 150 page notebook for each exam. So that took me I'd say about one solid, maybe close to 2 weeks of just prepping through the exam at a real slow pace, trying to absorb all that knowledge in the first place. And like I said, I did this per section. And then I followed that up with note cards. So I got the larger, like 3x5 note cards, and tried to break it up into. So I went through the exam a second time and tried to break it up into mainly focusing on grouping that. So I'm not looking at a 150-page notebook, but now I'm looking at maybe 30 or 40 note cards, mainly of the things that I thought were really important and had been repeated, because you will see repeats. So basically, you'll get through about half of an exam section, and you'll notice the questions start to repeat themselves, maybe with slightly different wording. So you kind of start to learn the stuff. Like for me, I learned a lot from just practicing these exams. I learned a lot of best practices, for example. So like, let's say for implementing a warehouse, I know a little bit about ETL, but I never knew about change data capture or much about partition swapping. I learned about the definitions. I learned the bullet points of that from the practice test. And then I went out and I watched YouTube videos. There's Udemy. There's just a handful of resources out there that actually walk you through those topics. So the exam like opened my eyes to what are these topics that I should be familiar with. And then I'd work through them, the ones that I felt were important. I'd actually work through those, on my own, basically in a real environment, not just in a testing environment, I guess you could say. But yeah, that was kind of my approach, is mainly focus on those practice exams. But is it worth it to take this test? Yeah, it totally is. So you're going to spend a couple $100 on the exam. You're going to spend a little bit of money probably on working through a book like this, which honestly I worked through the first one. And with me focusing, it was really weird. I was actually good at applying the material. So I focused on working through the book and actually working through everything, and I failed the test. When I focused more just on the test prep, I passed. So the first one, I worked entirely through the book. The second, and I failed it. The second test I took with the developer one, I didn't look at the book at all. All I did was I worked through the practice test and I passed. So with that said, you can be really good at the subject and you can fail the test. You can be really good at taking the test and you won't know what to do on the job. So I think a combination is really good, for that reason. But yeah, if you take a course at a university, I remember I took French film as an elective. I spent over $1,000 on taking a French film class just to fulfill a requirement. You know what I got from that? I was out a couple $1,000s from taking a class at a university. And I was out sometime. That's what I got. You look at the average salaries for people that have an MCSA or an MCSE. Let's say this is a little bit dated, but the MCSA for SQL Server is about $90,000 a year. See, the MCSE for business intelligence, that's kind of that. I mean, even though this is dated, this is still kind of the approach that I'm going for, and this is $92,000 a year. Granted, your response is only 21 people here and 188 there, so I mean, those numbers are pretty low. But I can say that I make right now, before I got certified, base salary $60,000. My benefits add an extra 20 to that, so you can put me right at 80,000, all benefits included. And this is before either of my certifications. Am I going to be able to say, oh, I've got a certification, give me 90,000 a year? No, I can't do that. But I know now that I can add these things to my resume, these skills to my resume, where before I came in and I was good at writing SQL, but now I can say I'm good at writing SQL. I use indexes at work. I apply these things at work. I know ETL. These are some advanced ETL strategies that I know. I can actually add these to my resume confidently I can say I've done these at work, and I am certified by the people who built the product that say that I'm good enough to do these things. That I believe probably within the next 6 months, I'll see probably a $10,000 to $15,000 pay increase. Is it completely because of the certification? No, but I think that the certification gave me a very structured study path, and the reward. Basically, what I did was I bought the practice exam, which has got a 30-day expiration on it. Just be aware of that. So you use it, but you've only got 30 days to use it. I used pretty much that full 30 days of practice through the exam like you don't know the material at all for the first week. Rerun through the exam material the second week. Actually practice using it on your computer the third week, and then go through and just review the fourth week. And I go ahead, and that way I try to set up the exam so I know, hey, I'm going to study for a month, and I want to try to finish this exam by the time that my practice exam runs up. So it kind of like forces you to do it within a confined amount of time. So basically a month in, you've learned a whole bunch of new skills, and you've applied them hopefully at work a little bit. So basically the certification is like the icing on the cake. It's basically your reward for doing everything that you've done, and now you've got something to take to the table and show for it. At that, like I say, you invest $1,000 over the course of 6 months, and you're because I don't expect you to do this, working a full-time job, taking the certification straight through. Like I expect you to probably take a little bit of a breather, like I did. But yeah, within 6 months, you spend $1,000, a couple $100 each time. It's totally worth it. Just compared to formal education, you're going to see a huge return on your investment doing this. Let's see. So what else? These are the books. The first one's pretty good. I bought the books for the other two. I can't really say if they're any good or not. I don't think that they're going to be in as much detail, but I've got them. I mean, certain things like $40 for a book. I'll spend that sometimes going out drinking with the guys on the weekend. So, if this is a book that could potentially help your career, I say go for it. I'm trying to think what other advice I have. I mean, I'd really stress, go through the exam. That was what I did first. I went through the practice exam. I took pen and paper notes. I broke each exam up into sections, and I kind of would give myself a schedule of, okay, well, this section is 57 questions. This other section is 20 questions. So I know I'm going to spend a different amount of time. I'd say on average, these tests are about 150. If you want to round up to, 160 questions or something, whatever you want to call it, I basically would try to hit, between 20 and 30 questions a day. So I would wake up, and this is my first week. My goal was in 1 week, get through every single question. You don't have to absorb the knowledge from it, but just see every single question so that you can see what the patterns are. You can see how hard it's going to be. And so I'd wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning before work, and I would run through 10 questions, because it takes the first handful of questions takes a long time for me to get through, because I'm writing everything down, and it gets faster because it becomes less and less new each time, so your speed increases as you're doing this. But yeah, I would do like 10 questions in the morning before work. I would try to get through 5 or 10 on my lunch break, and then whatever I had at the end of the night, I would try to get through 10 or 15 when I got home. As long as I hit my number so that I'm averaging out to finish up in 1 week, I was happy. I didn't expect to be able to pass at the end of that week. I just wanted to know what material I had to know. Then I would go back and do, like I said, the second week, run through it a little bit faster, hopefully, and kind of start putting everything on note cards, so my notes are more organized. Because the first time you don't know how to organize it, you don't know what you're going to see. So the second time that I'm running through it, I'm organizing it, saying, okay, these are all questions that go together. Then the third week, run through some YouTube videos. So just for the things that you think are interesting, or the things that really I didn't know anything about, certain topics. So the topics that I didn't know anything about, you could still pass just based on test questions, but I really wanted to see that stuff. Um, so yeah, I would do the YouTube videos that third week, and then the fourth week just back to being a refresher. And honestly, for some of these tests, for one of these tests, I passed in 2 weeks. So I mean, with 2 weeks of studying, so it can be done. Um, yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, $1,000 investment. You can do it self-paced. I mean, you get certification at the end. You're talking about, these kinds of salaries. I've seen it in my own salary that, uh, if I had additional skills, I know what I would be worth, and I know that I've learned those skills and I've got them certified, and I didn't have to do it on someone else's schedule. Yeah, hopefully, hopefully, you find this helpful, and yeah, good luck.